Here's a true story. A rabbi, whose name I won't mention, once gave a very powerful sermon about the beauties of Judaism. A non-Jewish woman sitting in the pews was so deeply inspired that she decided right there on the spot to convert. She waited until the service had ended and then approached the rabbi. "Rabbi," she said, "I love what you said. I want to be part of the Jewish people." The rabbi paused and then pointed to a set of doors. "You see those doors? Behind them is a kiddush. I want you to go into kiddush and then tell me if you still want to be part of the Jewish people." Maybe she caught the rabbi at an especially cynical moment. Maybe the rabbi was just worn out and wanted to go home for a nap. But I think this story actually tells us something important. You can learn a lot about Judaism from reading books, from watching lectures, and listening to sermons. But you can learn even more about Judaism from watching a Jewish community in action, and especially from the Kiddush. What would that worshiper have learned from going through those doors into the social hall? Would she have been warmly welcomed, or would she have stood alone? Would she encounter people who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her, or would she have been peppered with a few questions, "Where are you from? What do you do?" and then abruptly abandoned? Would her ears, dare I say it, encounter the sounds of kvetching? Would she stand in a circle listening to gossip about people she didn't know? Would she meet people of different ages and engage in conversation that enriches the mind and the heart? Might the conversation center on the three big B's: bagels, business, and baseball? Now that I've managed to offend all of you who love the big B's, as I do as well, let me assure you that I mean no harm. I simply want to open up a conversation about the nature of community, specifically our community here at Bethel. Believe it or not, I started thinking about this topic this past July, when we were all treated to breathtaking images of distant galaxies, courtesy of the James Webb Telescope. As we looked into deep space, we were transported hundreds of millions of years back in time, viewing high-resolution photos of stars, many of them previously invisible to us. Like all of you, I was captivated by these images of extraordinary beauty and grandeur. But along with the awe and amazement, I couldn't help feeling how small we are in that vast and glorious universe, how insignificant in the grand scheme of creation. Then I remembered some remarkable words from Psalm 147. Harofeh lishvurei lev umechabesh la'atzvotam, moneh mispar la'kochavim v'kulam shemot yikra. God heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. God counts the number of the stars, and to each one, God gives its name. The universe is indeed vast, containing multitude of stars. But the psalmist believes that God knows and cherishes each one of those stars. It's an exquisite image of divine care, the divine capacity to pay personal attention to every individual, to every suffering soul. And for anyone who sometimes feels like an invisible star lost in the midst of indifferent masses, it's an extraordinary image of what it means to matter. The high holidays drive this message home with urgency, like no other event on the Jewish calendar. These holy days center on notions of personal attention, personal care, and personal responsibility. According to the liturgy we chant today, God sees us as we are and knows each of us inside and out, our strengths and flaws, our hopes and our fears. These days are offered to us as a gift, affording us the chance to be deeply understood, accepted, and forgiven. The Untitled Tokev Prayer captures this sense of individual attention and one-to-one care with vivid imagery. Our sages envision God as a shepherd who's acutely mindful of every member of the flock. As a shepherd considers the flock, says the prayer, making each sheep pass under the staff, you count and consider and attend to the souls of all the living. The words of our Machzor express a particular theology, but just as important, I think, is the message that they convey about human beings. The days of awe remind us that every individual counts. Each one of us deserves attention, not just on the high holidays, but every day of the year. Who we are as individuals matters. What we do in our personal and communal lives has inherent value and significance. When the sages talk about God, they're often talking about people as well. Divine behavior is presented as a model for human conduct. Here's one of the most important examples. In the book of Devarim, it says, "Follow Adonai your God, acharei Adonai Elohechem telchu." Literally, walk after Adonai your God. The Talmudic sage Rabbi Chama raises an obvious question. Given the vast gulf between human beings and God, can a human being actually follow the divine presence? And then Rabbi Chama answers, it means that we should emulate the qualities and attributes of the Holy Blessed One. Lahalech achar midotav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you want to draw closer to God, walk in God's ways. Strive to behave in a godly manner. And the Talmud offers specific ways to do this. As the Holy One clothed Adam and Eve when they were naked, so you too should clothe the naked. As the Holy One visits the sick, appearing to Abraham following his circumcision at the terebinths of Mamre, so you too should visit the sick. As the Holy One comforts mourners, blessing Isaac after Abraham passed away, so you too should comfort mourners. And as God buries the dead, having buried Moses in the land of Moab, so you too should bury your dead. The nature of these acts is very striking. Our sages say that we should emulate God not by teaching or judging or leading others, not by practicing rituals like keeping kosher or observing Shabbat, and not by meditating or thinking deep spiritual thoughts. We draw closer to God by acting with divine compassion, by showing kindness to others. As human beings, that is our highest glory. The behaviors listed in this passage are those of the simplest, most humble kind. They involve reaching out to others at their times of greatest vulnerability. And they are strikingly personal behaviors, involving one-to-one attention and care. Most importantly, these acts are based on deep knowledge of the members of one's community, for we cannot know what another person might need unless we know what is going on in their life. So this Talmudic discussion about our relationship with God really instructs us on the nature of holy community, a community that embodies the most beautiful Jewish values. It is, above all, a community centered on chesed. There are some words in foreign languages that capture complex emotions in a single word that English lacks. For instance, there's a word in Tagalog, gigil, that means the irresistible urge to pinch or squeeze someone because they are loved and cherished. I think of that when I see my son, Oz. Nice, right? Chesed is a beautiful Jewish concept that defies translation in a single English word. It means goodness, love, and kindness, loyalty, faithful care, solidarity, and fidelity. Its essence is mutual support, the steady, nurturing ways that people care for one another over time. A community centered on chesed is a community built on thousands of individual acts of attention and concern. A healthy body survives because blood flows through the body, bringing essential nutrients to every part of the organism. Communities are organisms too, and their strength and health depend on the free flowing of loving kindness, connecting all members to one another. In a chesed-centered community, you give when you are able, and you receive when you're in need. You have the chance to connect with others in powerful ways, expressing your own potential goodness in action. You aren't embarrassed to ask for help. You can bring your whole self. You can bring your broken heart without the need to pretend. For in true community, there are no perfect lives and there are no perfect families. The Talmud tells a story about what happened when the 3rd century sage Rava became seriously ill. On the first day of his illness, Rava told his visitors, "Do not reveal to anyone that I am sick." But as time went by, he changed his mind and said, "Go and tell everyone in the market. Let all who love me pray that God will have mercy upon me." Rava instinctively did what many of us do. He wanted to hide his illness from the world. He didn't want to burden anyone with his troubles. Eventually, Rava realized that by letting others into his darkness, he could receive the support and the strength he needed. Knowing there was a loving community of people who would care for him and pray for him eased his isolation and gave him hope. One of the most powerful descriptions of a chesed-centered community that I've ever read comes from an essay published some years ago by Anne Lamott, in which she tells us why she takes her 7-year-old son to church. It's called Why I Make Sam Go to Church. Here's part of it. I make him because I can. I outweigh him by nearly 75 pounds. But that's only part of it. The main reason is that I want to give him what I found in the world, which is to say, a path and a little light to see by. Most of the people I know who have what I want, which is to say, purpose, heart, balance, gratitude, joy, are people with a deep sense of spirituality. They are people in community who pray or practice their faith. They are Buddhists, Jews, and Christians, people banding together to work on themselves and for human rights. They follow a brighter light than the glimmer of their own candle. They are a part of something beautiful. I saw something once from the Jewish Theological Seminary that said, a human life is like a single letter of the alphabet. It can be meaningless, or it can be a part of a great meaning. Our funky little church is filled with people who are working for peace and freedom, who are out there on the streets and inside praying, and they are home writing letters, and they are at the shelters with giant platters of food. When I was at the end of my rope, the people at St. Andrew tied a knot in it for me and helped me hold on. The church became my home in the old meaning of home, that it's where when you show up, they have to let you in. They let me in. They even said, you come back now. Sam was welcomed and prayed for at St. Andrew 7 months before he was born. When I announced during worship that I was pregnant, people cheered. All these old people, raised in Bible-thumping homes in the Deep South, clapped. Even the women whose grown-up boys had been or were doing time in jails or prisons rejoiced for me. And then almost immediately they set about providing for us. They brought clothes, they brought casseroles to keep in the freezer. They brought me assurance that this baby was going to be part of a family. And they began slipping me money. Now, a number of the older black women live pretty close to the bone financially on small Social Security checks. But routinely, they sidled up to me and stuffed bills in my pockets, 10s and 20s. One of the most consistent donors was a very old woman named Mary Williams, who was in her mid-80s now, so beautiful with her crushed hats and hallelujahs. She always brought me plastic baggies full of dimes. I was usually filled with a sense of something like shame until I'd remembered that wonderful line of Blake's, that we are here to learn to endure the beams of love. And I would take a deep, long breath and force these words out of my strangulated throat. Thank you. Anne Lamott's description of what she found at church touches my heart. True community is a rare and precious gift in these fragmented, polarizing times, and belonging to such a community has tangible benefits. Scientists tell us that having a network of strong social relationships strengthens the immune system, extends life even more than quitting smoking, speeds recovery from surgery, and reduces the risk of depression and anxiety disorders. Dr. Jonathan Haidt, a psychologist who draws on the wisdom of religious tradition, writes, "We need to interact and intertwine with others. We need the give and the take. We need to belong." I've thought a lot about this need to belong as I've observed the changes here at Bethel over the years. There's been much research in recent decades on the decline of community in modern life and on the reluctance of millennials, those born between 1981 and 1996, to affiliate with religious institutions as their parents once did. People in their 30s and 40s are in general less trusting of institutions. They avoid churches and synagogues where they perceive barriers, financial or otherwise. Even so, they have a profound spiritual hunger. They yearn for meaning, for deep human relationships, for a sense of connection to something greater than themselves. The authors of one well-known study of millennials in 2005 called How We Gather emphasize this. Lack of deep community is indeed keenly felt, they write. Rates of isolation, depression, and loneliness in this generation continue to rise. Roughly 60% of Americans report feeling lonely, with 2.5 million youth suffering from depression. Bethel is beautifully defying the predictions of the How We Gather study. We are a growing and diverse community that includes many young people. Each morning we say, Ashrenu matov chelkenu uma yafa yerushatenu. How fortunate we are. How good is our portion. How beautiful our heritage. I look around at our congregation and feel the truth of these words. We are indeed fortunate, blessed with a wonderful, expanding community. However, with our growth comes challenges. I know that for some of you, the small Chemish Chevra you once knew is taking on a different character. On Shabbat mornings, and even more so on these high holidays, you tell me that you look around and think, look at all these people. I don't know anyone. At such moments, you might feel like Bethel isn't home, a place where everybody knows your name and you know theirs. Instead, it feels like you're surrounded by strangers, a vast universe of faces you don't recognize. This is also true for those of you who just joined Bethel over the last few months or in recent years. It can be disorienting, I know. In the greater scheme of things, we're still a smallish congregation, but we're much bigger than we once were. And we all want Bethel to still feel Hamish and comfortable for everyone. We hope every member of every age will feel noticed, seen, and heard, known and connected to your rabbis as well as your fellow members. It brings to mind a phrase coined by Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, a sense of significant being. Heschel said that we need this in order to feel that life is worthwhile. We need to know that we count, that we matter to others, not that our accomplishments or achievements are notable, but that our very existence is valued. Just to be is a blessing, wrote Heschel. Just to live is holy. The right kind of community can be the fertile ground in which our sense of significant being takes root, grows, and blossoms. In such communities, the pain of life is eased, broken hearts are tenderly nurtured, and wounds begin to heal. Our congregational mission is preserving tradition, embracing change. We have a rich tradition here at Bethel of caring for one another. We do our best to practice the mitzvot listed in that Talmudic teaching about how to emulate God. We celebrate Brit Milah and baby namings, and when a new baby is born in our congregation, many members sign up to bring meals to the family. When someone is sick, we call or visit. We pray for healing. We participate in Shiva Minyanim and reach out to mourners during the period after a loved one's death. And when someone dies, Bethel's Chevra Kadisha, or Holy Burial Society, provides special assistance to members and their loved ones. They ritually prepare the body for burial through tahara, purification, and then they sit shmira, never leaving the body alone until it is time for burial. The work of this group embodies chesed, that sense of mutual loyalty and love. As one member of the Chevra put it, I do this for others, knowing that one day my community will do this for me. Another told me that being a part of the Chevra Kadisha is the most spiritual thing she does. She recalled how it feels when she takes the last shmira shift, just before the funeral. She says the family arrives and sees that she has not left their loved one's side, and she knows that her presence mattered to them and gave them comfort. When the mourner returns home after the funeral, Bethel's Nichum Avelim committee fulfills the mitzvah of comforting mourners in a very practical way. Volunteers are here to help prepare their home for Shiva, so they are not burdened with this task. Through all these mitzvot, we try to walk in God's ways. We try to live out the words of the psalmist, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Lo irara ki ata imadi. We do what we can to ensure that in times of need, no one feels alone. We aim to create a circle of kindness to hold one another when we're struggling. That's our Bethel tradition, and it was easier to uphold it way back when we were a small, funkier shul. Now it's time to embrace change. We are larger and our needs have expanded, and it's a greater challenge to help everyone feel involved and included. Bethel is already a strong community. I believe that with all my heart. And many of you work tirelessly in the work of chesed, quietly and constantly in ways that touch our hearts. But how can we build even more robust connections within our congregation, helping all of us to feel that we belong? Be assured that your rabbis are here working hard to get to know all of you and to reach out in personal ways to members who are going through a tough time. You can help us with this. If you know of someone who might welcome a call or a visit from us, please let us know. But building a loving, chesed-centered community depends on all of us, not just the clergy. If you're looking for ways to feel a sense of significant being, try bringing a meal to some stressed-out new parents or to someone who's ill, offering some loving kindness to someone who is grieving. Join the Hever Kadisha and offer members of this community and their loved ones chesed shel emet, the truest act of chesed. And come to Shiva Minyanim, even for someone for whom you don't know. Helping is a wonderful way to connect with others and feel that your actions matter. Throughout the year, you'll hear about many ways to join small groups and participate in gatherings within the Bethel community, including Sukkot across Bethel, upcoming, in which we sign up to host or be hosted for a Shabbat dinner. These are all ways of helping us all get ready to know each other. Sign up or show up, make some new connections, or strengthen your ties with people you'd like to know better. Most of all, if you can, show up here in person. You can't hold someone's hand over Zoom or feel the warmth of a Shabbos community or taste the unforgettable tuna we offer here at Kiddush. Not to make you hungry. In creating community, small things matter. Thousands of small acts add up to something great, giving others a sense of significant being, creating that circle of kindness. Of course, all this giving and caring has to be carried out with sensitivity. Chesed is a sacred value, but we all have the need for privacy and alone time, and some of us more than others. We don't want to be intrusive. And when we yearn to give to others, we should think carefully about whose needs are actually being met. We may want to squeeze the one we love, but they may or may not welcome our squeeze. Not everyone is in the mood for conversation. Not everyone wants to be called, comforted, or visited. But in general, it's better to err on the side of giving. Be like God. Count every star. Notice people. Give the gift of individual attention. These many months of COVID have made some of us wary of being with others for very good reasons. We may be a little out of practice in the business of human connection and conversation. So this is an especially good time to remember the teaching of our sages, Al tifrosh min hatzibor, do not separate yourself from the community. It reminds us that we're meant to live our lives in relationship with others. And if we let our ties to community lapse, we lose something very precious. Sometimes, even with the best of intentions, our congregation will fall short. On this day of confession, it seems appropriate to acknowledge the ways we have failed to live up to our ideals. This past year, a longtime member decided to leave Bethel. Someone in her family had been experiencing health challenges, and she had become their primary caregiver. Due to the pandemic and her new responsibilities, she was unable to show up at Bethel. Some of her friends would call or send a text or an email to check in. Her rabbis tried to stay in regular contact with her. But as the months passed, the calls from friends became fewer. She felt isolated and let down by her community. I gave so much to Bethel, she told me, so much of my time, energy, and commitment. But when I needed them, where were they? Now, if I do get a call, it seems like it's only to ask me for something. I know that she's not the only member who's had this experience, and I know you feel as bad about this as I do. A community is not perfect. People let us down. They do not always show up the way we want them to, and though it's inadvertent, it can still hurt. At such times, I hope we can all strive for understanding, for compassion, and forgiveness, knowing that we can always do better. And if that congregant were here today, I would want to tell her this story. Once upon a time, a rabbi paid a visit to a member of his congregation. He found her at home on a chilly winter afternoon. The house was dark. The woman lived alone. After a slightly awkward greeting, the woman invited her rabbi into her home and offered him a cup of tea. They sat down in front of the fireplace. For a few moments, both were quiet as they watched the crackling fire and felt its comforting warmth. Then a conversation began. "How are you doing, Hannah?" the rabbi asked his congregant. "I haven't seen you around lately, and I've missed you." "Well, Rabbi, I'll tell you. You know that I used to be a regular. I was there every Shabbat morning. I came to Torah study. The synagogue was a big part of my life. But then I came down with the flu. It turned into pneumonia and really knocked me out. So for a few weeks, I didn't show up, and no one missed me. No one got in touch to see if I was okay. To tell you the truth, I was hurt. I thought to myself, they really don't care about me. Who needs this? Who needs them? So I stopped coming." "Thank you for telling me, Hannah," said the rabbi. "I'm so very sorry." They sat in silence once again for a few moments as the rabbi thought about what he had heard. Then, in silence, the rabbi reached out and picked up the iron poker that stood beside the fireplace. He reached into the fire and carefully moved a small ember out of the flames so it stood separate and alone, off to the side. They watched together in silence as the glow of the ember faded and its flame died out. At last, only a few small sparks remained. Then the rabbi moved the lone ember back into the center of the fireplace. All at once, it caught fire again, and the flame blazed up more brightly. The rabbi turned to the woman and saw that her eyes had filled with tears. "Rabbi, I understand," she said. "I need to be with my people." "Please come back," said the rabbi. "Please come home. We need you too."